Hello everyone and welcome to another TGN Anime review. Bandai Namco has sent us an early copy of the 7 Deadly Sins Knights of Britannia. So despite the game coming out today, the day when this video is releasing, we've already played around 10 hours of it. We did some versus battles, we completed story mode, and not much else because there's not much else to offer. I've been covering this game before release here and there, and I would brace for impact because I don't think I have very good news regarding this game. My name is Globku, here's our review. Knights of Britannia is a 3D anime brawler. You fight in a 3D space and you're free to move around the stage. Like many other anime brawlers, there are several movement abilities that help you close in the distance. Double tap the jump button to execute a dash towards the opponent, or you can also spend some mana to immediately teleport behind them. Every character has a light and a strong attack, and very limited combos. There are slight variations depending on the character that you pick, but they're largely the same, which makes this 25 character roster look a little bit less impressive. Their magics are pretty different though. Every character has 3 different magic attacks that spend their mana, and this is where characters can become kind of unique. Each character also has a special attack that uses a different gauge, and this can have different effects. For instance, Meliodas deals heavy damage. Most of the characters' special actually just deals heavy damage, but then you have some unique ones like Ban, who doesn't deal any damage, but he gains super armor, so he doesn't flinch when he is attacked, and after a period of time he becomes extremely weakened. So movement for all the characters is very similar. Combos are very similar as well. The magics and the special attacks is where you start to see some differences. And then we also have something called the different character types, which give you different playstyles depending on the character that you pick. There are 3 character types: the speed types, the magic types, and the power types. The speed types can run all over the place. They're able to extend combos and air juggle a lot easier than other characters. Magic types typically have more range and powerful attacks, but everything they do spends their mana, even their basic attacks, so after they run out, they're basically inactive until the mana regenerates. And then the power types usually move very slowly. They just walk around, they don't run. They can still do the dash and the teleport ability, but their basic movement is just walking. To make up for that though, they have a lot of armor. When they're hit by most attacks, they don't flinch, they can just power through that stuff. So the different types do feel different when you play as each one of them, but playing 2 different characters from the same type doesn't feel that different. Even with their magic attacks being different, it's usually just a question of, okay, can I combo from a strong attack into magic number 1 or magic number 2? There's not a lot of depth, there's not a big learning curve to learn each character. They all feel kinda samey. There sure are some very unique effects, but you have to dig deep to find those. The game supports 1v1 and 2v2 battles, in which 2v2 is always with an AI partner who just kinda does whatever he wants, and you can call them in for a co-op attack. If they accept, then you need to land a certain number of attacks to trigger a co-op finisher. And yes, I did say if they decide to accept, because they can refuse you. Depending on your friendship level with your co-op partner, they are more likely to help you or not, which is an extremely infuriating system because you call them for an attack, they refuse, so you keep trying and they keep refusing until they finally accept. It's easy to understand the principle behind this system. If 2 characters don't get along, they shouldn't help each other, but as a gameplay thing, it is incredibly frustrating. The stages that these battles take place in also feature a lot of destructible objects for the most part. Some stages don't have any destructible objects, so you kind of have the 2 options on whether you want to fight with a lot of destructible stuff or not. And this mostly just gives battles more of a visual impact, but I don't think this game's visuals are that impressive. So watching houses or rocks crumbling was never something that blew my mind. There's also a gameplay element to destroying these objects, which is the fact that traps come out of them. Traps are these crystals that have different colors, and each color has a different effect. If you attack the crystal, you then trigger the trap, and it can be a simple explosion, something that freezes you in place, it can even heal you. Both players can get hit by the trap, and it doesn't matter who activated it in the first place, but the game has this auto lock-on system that can make it pretty hard to hit the traps, since you can't directly aim at them. You sort of have to position the trap between you and the opponent, which results in most traps just being activated by accident. And that's how the gameplay works, but more importantly perhaps is, how does it all feel when it's put together? And the answer is, it feels pretty bad. The fights in general all feel kinda samey, since most characters share a lot of abilities. And a lot of these abilities knock the opponents very far into the distance, which means most of the battles will end up near this kind of invisible wall, this fake wall that is just there to limit the stage space. And fighting here does not feel good at all. It just feels very poorly designed because of that. The destructible environments can also cause your character to become stuck on geometry on occasion, and since the traps are mostly activated by accident and visually it's not that impressive, this just feels like a superfluous addition to the whole system. And to top it all off, the camera can be atrocious. First of all, it doesn't take into account objects that have been destroyed, so if there's a rock flying in front of you, the camera doesn't even try to adjust. Your view is just blocked until the rock disappears. And if you're in a corner, the camera is also pretty reliable at not being good. So yeah, overall, the basic system, the basic combat, fighting in this game is not that fun. And now that we've talked about the basics of this game's combat system, let's talk about game modes. There isn't a lot here. There's adventure mode and duel mode. Adventure mode is this game's story mode. In this mode, you have an overworld that you slowly unlock as you complete quests. And from this overworld, you're able to get to specific locations where you can do main quests, side quests, or field quests. The main quests and side quests are usually accompanied by some dialogue cutscene, giving you story and context as to what you're doing. Most side quests are actually essential to understanding the Seven Deadly Sins story, in my opinion, as they include flashbacks or different character perspectives of a certain event, while field quests are basically just challenges that randomly pop up on the map that you complete to obtain some materials. These materials are required to unlock magic items in this huge talent tree. This is your progression system in story mode. You unlock magic items that boost your health, attack power, magic power, defenses, and a lot more. And then you can equip those items on each one of your playable characters. In general, the structure of these missions is pretty basic. You have a dialogue scene, then you have a fight, and then you have another dialogue scene to complete the quest. And the fights themselves, what you do in the story game, it can be a one-on-one or a two-on-two battle like the ones we already talked about, or it could be you fighting against a bunch of weaker enemies, which in all honesty doesn't feel a lot better than the 1v1 or 2v2 battles. There are a couple of quests that escape this mold in story mode. We're not going to show them so we don't spoil it, but one, there aren't a lot of them, and two, they're not that fun anyway. In my opinion, this game is not a good way to learn the story of the Seven Deadly Sins. If you haven't watched the anime or read the manga, the game skips some details and a lot of characters just because they didn't want to model them, and the result is a very confusing story because some events just happen and they have no explanation as to why or how. The cutscenes themselves have also only received minimal work. Sometimes they don't even bother to lip sync the dialogue. And the characters just sit there in their idle animation. The voice acting is good, it's on par with the anime. They brought all the original voice actors into this game, but there's only minimal animation work, so it detracts from the whole thing. And because of these dialogue scenes paired up with the lackluster visuals, even if you've already experienced the Seven Deadly Sins story, I think this also ends up not being a great way to relive it. Adventure mode covers season 1 of the anime, it even introduces season 2 after the credits, and as someone who has only watched season 1, their introduction to season 2 was very confusing. There are just too many holes that they don't bother explaining. Stuff just happens and you have no answer as to why or how, and I imagine that's how someone who hasn't watched season 1 has felt through this entire game. Story mode is around 10 hours long if you're a completionist. If you just want to mainline the main story, it should be between 5 to 7 hours long. And then moving on from adventure mode to duel mode, this is where you can play versus matches against the CPU or against your friends or online. So let's look at the options that we have. Against the CPU, you can do a 1v1 or a 2v2, and that's what the second option is. The co-op battle on the menu is a 2v2 versus the CPU, where your partner is also an AI. You cannot play locally with a friend versus the CPU. Locally with a friend, all you can do is go into versus and have a 1v1 battle. So hey, that's better than nothing, I guess. Then if you want to take this game online, you have matchmaking for 1v1 and 2v2, or private matches also for 1v1 and 2v2. And while online, the co-op matches will actually give you a human partner, so you can have a session with up to 4 players. This game is not competitive. Some attacks are very unreliable. Take the Mirage Step, for instance, which is that teleport that every character does. You vanish and reappear behind your opponent. This is the only way you have to break their guard. If the opponent is just blocking all the time, there's nothing else you can do besides attacking them from behind. But because the environment can be so random in this game, sometimes your character will not show up behind the opponent, it will show up above the opponent. And this randomness also applies to a lot of magic attacks and specials, which makes this fighting system just unreliable and not competitive at all. There are also some characters that are just straight up broken, because it feels like balance wasn't a main concern they had when building this game. And I think overall that will make for a pretty bad fighting game experience. Personally, I don't see the online scene surviving for too long. There might be a small community that tries to keep it alive, but chances are you'll have a hard time finding matches not too long after launch. If you want to play online, I'd say try it out this weekend, because I don't know if it will make it to the next. In conclusion, I'd like to say that this game will appeal to some fans of the 7 Deadly Sins, only the most hardcore fans who just want to play as these characters regardless of how the game actually plays. But I honestly think those people are selling themselves short. 7 Deadly Sins has some really awesome fighting scenes that I'd love to see represented in an anime game. I think this series and its fans deserve a better game, and in my book, an anime game that cannot appeal outside of that very small bubble is a bad game. And therefore, here's my score. If this is your first TGN Anime review, our scores go from F all the way up to A. F and E are bad games, C and D are mediocre or okay, B and A are good games. So with all that we've discussed today, here is my score for Knights of Britannia.
あれ? もうおしまい?
I hate giving bad scores. I hate when video games let us down. I'm an optimistic at heart, but I feel a big responsibility when reviewing video games. And if I only focus on the positives, then I might be misleading people who are potentially spending their money on stuff that they don't actually like. But more important than the score is understanding how I got there. And if you feel that my problems with the game don't bother you personally, then feel free to disregard this entire review and get the game. Have fun, man. But these were my honest thoughts with Knights of Britannia. If you want to watch our previous review, it was a lot more positive. Dragon Ball FighterZ, you can watch it right here. If you're in the mood for something else, there's also the video at the bottom. But as always, thank you very much for watching. My name's Globku, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.